Today I'm going to make a new axe handle for this axe head. I already made a handle for it, but unfortunately I made it 5 centimeters too short, so the customer had to ship it back to me, and I'm of course making him a new handle free of charge. He liked the profile from the old handle, so I traced it up and extended the length a bit, and I found this nice bit of European ash to work with. First up, I'm going to cut it up with my bandsaw, get it into a nice rough shape. Now I'm going to use my plunge router and my little nifty jig to plane out the surface where I want to make the palm swell inlay. Before I start doing any carving, I'll glue up the palm swell. I like using Tight Bond. I've found that that's the best wood glue for these handles. I've tried a few different ones out during the years, but this one is the one I prefer. It's a bit of excess glue, but you know, a little extra doesn't hurt. I've decided to go with some American walnut as a backing, a thin layer, and then an unknown species of wood. I'm not entirely sure. It might be butternut wood. It's something I got a long time ago, and I have heaps of the stuff laying around. And I think it looks really nice once it's oiled up. The idea behind these laminated and inlaid palm swells is to, for one, you can save a bit on materials in regards to the planks that you're using for your handles. You don't need to remove as much wood because you can work with a thinner piece and make a nice big palm swell regardless. But obviously it also gives you some creative opportunities. And as any woodworker knows, you can never have enough clamps. So I'm going to let it sit and cure overnight, and I'll be back at it in the morning. So the next day, the glue cured nicely, and I cut off the excess wood on the bandsaw. Now I'm going to move on to the grinder, where I'm going to knock off the edges and rough out the palm swell. I find that with these type of inlays, it's a bit difficult to work the handle down with traditional tools. They have a tendency of biting and chipping in the transition between the different woods. You can get around it with a rasp, but I just find it's much easier on the belt grinder. So I'll grind it down into a rough shape and clean up some of the edges before I move on to the hand tools. It's also a good opportunity to have a look if the lamination went well and there are no gaps in the glue up. You can see some gaps there at the bottom, but that's going to be cut to shape once the handle is essentially completely done anyway. So I'm pretty happy with it. I think it looks really nice with the grain orientations I got going on it. So the first step for me when I make my handles is I use a draw knife to rough out the eye with the handle to fit the eye. The draw knife is really good to remove big chunks of material quite quickly, but I find it a bit aggressive once we get to the more finer details of fitting the head. You want to be a bit careful working with the draw knife. You can quite easily tear the grain and get a nice chip out, which might just ruin the actual handle, because if you have any gaps essentially or too little material connecting inside of the eye of the head, you're gonna run the risk of the head making itself loose over time when you use it, because it just allows for that little bit of motion in the eye or vibrations that'll start digging away in the wood. So it's really important to have a nice tight fit and an even fit with no gaps in it. So I got the head on for a bit, and you can see the markings at the left. You can use those to give you an idea where you need to remove material. And the places where it doesn't leave marks, you essentially don't want to remove any material. So the steps from here is put on the head, you remove the head, you use the markings to indicate where you need to remove material. You remove the material, you seat the head again. And you keep doing this essentially until you have it onto the handle where you want it. I usually aim to have about 1 to 2 centimeters of handle protruding through the eye. Just for sort of the final fit, I like to use a spoke shave. It's just less aggressive and really helps create a nice clean transition between the handle and the bit that's inside the eye. Now, if you don't have a belt grinder and you want to work with inlays and stuff like that, I highly recommend you get one of these Shinto rasps. It's essentially just a manual grinder, if you will. It makes it really easy. It doesn't take a whole lot of skill or hours behind a sharpening stone to get comfortable with sharpening a cutting tool. They barely cost anything, and any woodworker should have one of these in his toolbox. I like to use it for just smoothing out the surface after working on the belt grinder. The belt grinder has a habit of leaving some bumps here and there, but the Shinto's really nice for just cleaning it up a bit. I then use a spoke shave to clean up all the marks from the rasp. And then it's on to doing some sanding. I sand it down to a grit 120 using this little orbital sander, and then I usually sand the rest in by hand with a piece of sandpaper or something akin to that. I always start off setting the wedges by using a soft dead blow hammer or something similar that doesn't have too much force behind it. And then once it's into the axe head, I like to use a big heavy mallet to just whack it in there. I'll trace the line on the wedge to make sure that I don't force it down further than the kerf, because then you run the risk of splitting the handle. You can see here there was so much force behind it that I actually cracked the handle at the top, but I don't think it's anything running deep, and I wouldn't be worried about it at all. And a little bit of sanding just to tidy things up. A little bit of oil in the palm swell really makes a contrast pop. And before the final coating of oil, just a quick sand down, grit 500. I use a mixture of linseed oil and beeswax. It gives it a really nice smooth finish, but with a bit of grippiness to it. And the beeswax really helps keep it safe from water and whatnot. The wedge curled up a bit at the ends, which doesn't hurt anybody, but I'm just going to remove it real quick with a knife. And there it is, all done. I'm really happy with how this one turned out. I hope the customer likes it as well. Thank you for watching, and you can always ask a question in the comments. I try to answer everyone as fast as I can. Have a good one.